Everyone says it. You've heard it 1,000 times from the old timers at the bait shop. Find the deepest hole on the lake and you'll find the winter bream. Well, what if I told you that is probably the single worst piece of fishing advice you will ever get? Seriously. Today we're going to talk about the huge difference between a real winter bream staging area and just another random dead hole in the lake bed. By the end of this video, you will understand the subtle signs that almost every angler misses. I'll show you exactly why that spot that looks absolutely perfect on your fancy fish finder is often a complete waste of your time and energy. So let me ask you this before we start. Do you believe in secret honey holes that hold fish all winter? Or do you think it's all just luck? Let me know your honest opinion in the comments.
So why is this topic so important? Because it's about your time. It's about the frustration of sitting on a bucket in the freezing cold, staring at a motionless rod tip, convinced you're in the right place when you're not. For generations, the conventional wisdom has been that bream, like many other fish, ball up in the deepest, most stable water to wait out the winter. And because of this, hundreds of anglers head to the same well-known community holes year after year. They drill their holes, drop their lines, and hope for the best. It's a habit, a tradition. But what modern electronics have shown us, if you know how to read them correctly, is that the fish are often somewhere else entirely. They are in places that are more complex and strategic than just a simple deep basin. First, let's tackle the biggest myth head-on, the deep hole trap. Imagine a 50-foot deep basin in the middle of a lake. It looks like the perfect refuge on a map, but these isolated, bowl-shaped holes can often be biological deserts in the winter. They can lack sufficient oxygen near the bottom, especially in late winter under thick ice and snow cover. More importantly, they often lack food. A bream isn't going to sit for 3 months in an empty room, no matter how stable the temperature is. Think of it like a human choosing a house. You wouldn't choose a concrete bunker with no windows and no kitchen, even if it was safe. You need resources, so when you see that big, obvious, deep spot on your map, your first thought shouldn't be fish here. It should be, is there any reason for a fish to be here? This simple question is the first step to avoiding the trap that catches so many anglers. So what is a random hole versus a staging area? A random hole is just that, a simple depression. It's a topographical feature with no other redeeming qualities. Picture a smooth, muddy bowl. Fish might pass through it, but they have no reason to stay there. A true winter staging area, on the other hand, is a habitat. It's a combination of features. It has the necessary depth for security and temperature stability, yes, but it's much more than that. It's an ecosystem. It's a place where fish can rest, feel safe, and have easy access to food without expending too much energy. Throughout the next few points, we're going to break down the specific ingredients that turn a simple hole into a 5-star winter resort for bream. The key is to stop thinking about a spot and start thinking about a zone or a neighborhood. Now let's get into the first real sign. This one is huge. We're talking about subtle changes in bottom composition. Most fish finders can show you this if you know what you're looking for. A bottom that is all one uniform type, like deep muck or silt, is generally not great. It doesn't hold much life. What you are searching for are transitions. You are looking for the places where that soft mud bottom meets a harder bottom, like sand, gravel, or clay. These transition lines are magnets for invertebrate life, the tiny bugs and crustaceans that bream feed on all winter. It's the equivalent of a buffet line. So, as you're slowly moving over a potential area, don't just stare at the depth number. Watch the bottom return on your sonar. A thick, soft-looking line that suddenly thins out or gets brighter. That's your gold mine. That's where you drill your first hole. Let's paint a picture of this in action. You're out on the ice, it's a cold morning. You've identified a promising deep area on your map. You start drilling and checking with your flasher. The first 5 holes all show the same thing, a thick red line indicating a soft, mucky bottom at 40 feet. It's discouraging, but you keep going, moving towards the edge of the hole. On the 6th hole, something changes. The bottom return is suddenly a thinner, brighter yellow and red line. You've just found a patch of sand or gravel. This is not a random occurrence. This is a feature. This is the spot where the dinner table is located. The bream might be resting over the mud just a few feet away, but they will slide over to this hard bottom area to feed. You've just found the key piece of the puzzle that 90% of other anglers would have completely missed. The second critical sign is the presence of structure. Bream, especially the big ones, are just like any other animal. They relate to cover. A completely barren, featureless hole is an intimidating place for a fish to live. They want something to break up the monotony. This structure doesn't have to be a massive, complex brush pile either. It can be incredibly subtle. We're talking about a single, submerged log, a small cluster of rocks, or a sharp drop-off along one edge of the hole. These features provide a sense of security from predators. They also create current breaks, even in a lake, and can concentrate food. So when you are scanning a deep hole, don't just look at the center. Meticulously scan the edges. Look for any little irregularity, any tick or bump on the bottom that looks different from the surrounding area. That's very likely where the fish will be. Here's a real-life scenario for you. I remember fishing a lake that had a well-known bream hole that was 60 feet deep. Anglers would pepper the middle of it with holes and catch a few small fish. One day, I decided to ignore the middle completely. I spent a full hour just mapping the perimeter with my sonar. On the north side, I found it. It wasn't much, just a 2-foot-high ridge of rocks running for about 20 yards along the drop-off. It was the only piece of hard structure in the entire basin, and sure enough, that's where all the big, mature bream were holding. They weren't in the deepest part of the hole. They were relating to the best real estate on the block. The other fishermen were in the right church, but they were sitting in the wrong pew, so to speak. That little detail made all the difference. The third sign, and this might be the most strategic one, is access to feeding flats. Think of the deep hole as the bream's living room or bedroom. It's where they rest and feel safe. But they don't eat in their bedroom. To eat, they need to go to the kitchen. In the winter, the kitchen is often a nearby shallow flat, maybe in the 10 to 20 foot range, that still gets some sunlight and supports weed growth or insect life. A true wintering hole will almost always have a clear, defined highway leading to one of these feeding zones. This could be a channel, a subtle ditch, a long underwater point, or a saddle connecting the deep hole to the flat. The bream use these routes to move up and feed during stable weather periods, especially in the low light hours of morning and evening, without exposing themselves in open water for too long. So, how do you find this highway? You have to zoom out on your lake map, stop focusing on just the single deep spot. Look at how it connects to the rest of the lake. Is there a natural contour line that leads directly from the 40-foot basin up to a 15-foot wide flat? If so, that is your high probability zone. The bream won't be scattered randomly. They will be concentrated in the deep water, right at the entrance to that highway. They are essentially staging at the front door, waiting for the dinner bell to ring. Fishing right at the mouth of that channel or on that underwater point is often far more productive than fishing in the geographic center of the deep hole itself. You are intercepting the fish as they commute, and that is a powerful strategy. Let's talk about the fourth and most obvious sign, the presence of baitfish. It's the oldest rule in fishing for a reason. Find the food, find the fish. Even if bream are primarily feeding on invertebrates on the bottom, they are still attracted to areas with a healthy population of baitfish. The presence of minnows or small shiners indicates a healthy, oxygenated environment. And while adult bream may not be actively chasing these minnows, their presence creates a sense of life and opportunity in the area. On your flasher or sonar, this might look like small, flickering marks suspended a few feet off the bottom, or even a faint, cloudy mass. Many anglers ignore these signs, thinking they are just clutter or tiny perch. That's a massive mistake. That clutter is the sign of a living, breathing ecosystem, and that is exactly what you are looking for. Think about it like this. You pull up to two different diners on the side of the road. One has a completely empty parking lot. The other has 15 cars parked outside. Which one are you going to choose? You're going to the one with the cars because that's a sign of life, a sign that something good is happening inside. It's the exact same logic under the ice. A hole that is completely devoid of any marks, no bait, no small fish, nothing, is an empty parking lot. But a hole where you see those little flickers of life, even if they aren't your target species, is a place with potential. It tells you that the conditions are right to support life, and the bream are likely to be nearby, taking advantage of that same healthy environment. Now it's time for some serious myth-busting. The old idea that bream just go to the bottom of a hole and become dormant all winter is completely false. It's a convenient story, but it's not what really happens. They absolutely do move. Their metabolism slows down, yes, so they aren't as active as they are in the summer, but they are not hibernating. They follow distinct daily patterns, especially during periods of stable, high-pressure weather. As we discussed, they will move from their deep water holding areas up to the feeding flats. This movement is often vertical as well as horizontal. You might find them glued to the bottom in the middle of the day, but suspended 5 or 10 feet off the bottom in the morning or evening. So if you drop your bait to the bottom and leave it there all day, you could be missing 90% of the fish. This is why hole hopping and actively searching are so important in the winter. The idea of sitting on one hole from sunup to sundown is a low percentage play. The fish are on the move, and so you should be too. If a spot isn't producing after 20 or 30 minutes, don't be afraid to move. Try a different part of the structure. Try fishing higher in the water column. The most successful winter anglers are the ones who understand that the fish are not static. They are following a routine. Your job isn't just to find their house, it's to figure out which room they are in at that specific time of day. This active mindset is a game changer compared to the old wait them out philosophy. Let's talk a little more about using your electronics correctly. Owning a $10,000 sonar unit doesn't guarantee you'll find fish. It's about interpretation. Stop using it as just a digital measuring stick for depth. Start paying attention to the details. On a modern sonar, look for that grey line or bottom hardness feature. It literally tells you the difference between a soft, mucky bottom and a hard, rocky one. On a traditional flasher, you're looking at the width and colour of the bottom return. A thin, sharp and intensely red or orange band means a hard bottom. A wide, soft and less intense band means muck. Learning to read this is more important than knowing the exact depth down to the inch. You are not a surveyor. You are a habitat detective. Another pro tip for your electronics: pay attention to the marks that are next to the main school. Often you'll see a big, intimidating blob on the screen which represents a dense school of smaller fish. The big, mature bream, the ones you're really after, are frequently loners or travel in small groups. They will often be holding just off to the side of that main school or suspended slightly above or below it. They are the cautious old bulls of the herd. So if you see that giant school, don't just drop your lure right into the middle of it. Drill a few extra holes 10 to 20 feet away on all sides of it. Very often, that's where you will find your trophy fish quietly waiting in the wings. I want to share the story of the barren pit to really drive this home. There's a lake I fish where there is a perfectly round, 90-foot deep hole. It is, by far, the deepest spot in the entire lake. And every single winter weekend, you will see a small village of ice shacks set up right over the middle of it. People have been fishing it for 50 years, but here's the secret. It almost never produces big fish. Why? Because it's a trap. It's a featureless, muddy bowl with no structure, no significant bottom transitions, and no good access to feeding areas. It's a biological dead zone. The fish have absolutely no reason to be there. They are simply not there. Yet people continue to fish it because the map tells them it's the deepest spot. They are trusting the map more than their own results. Now the punchline to that story. Less than a quarter-mile away from that 90-foot barren pit, there is a less obvious feature. It's an old river channel that cuts across a large flat. The channel is only about 60 feet deep, so it doesn't stand out on the map like the big pit does. But this channel has everything we've been talking about. It has sharp drop-offs for edges, it has a gravel bottom, and it acts as a perfect highway for fish moving onto the flats to feed. And that is where the real wintering school of giant bream lives. The anglers who take the time to look for the habitat instead of just the depth are the ones who consistently catch fish, while the village on the barren pit goes home with nothing but cold hands. It is the perfect illustration of our entire discussion. So, let's put this all together into a practical, step-by-step checklist. When you approach a new potential wintering spot, here's what you do. 1. Identify the deep water on your map, but also identify the nearby shallow feeding flats. 2. Look for the most likely highway or connection point between those two zones. That's your starting area. 3. Once you're there, use your electronics to find a bottom transition zone where soft bottom meets hard bottom. 4. Within that transition zone, search for a specific piece of structure like a rock pile, a log, or a sharp inside turn. 5. When you find that magic combination of all 4 factors, check for signs of life, like baitfish. If you can check all 5 of those boxes, you haven't just found a random hole, you've found a high percentage bream habitat. Now for the final test. You've done your homework and you believe you've found a true staging area. How do you fish it to confirm? Don't just sit in one spot. Use an aggressive search pattern. Drill at least 3 or 4 holes in a line across the spot before you even start fishing. Drop your transducer in each one to see what's there. Fish each hole for no more than 10 minutes if you are not marking fish or getting bites. Use a small, flashy lure like a tungsten jig tipped with a spike to call fish in. Your goal in the first 30 minutes is not necessarily to catch a limit, it's to gather information. Are the fish here? Are they aggressive? Are they suspended? A true staging area will almost always reveal itself pretty quickly. You'll see marks on the flasher, even if they don't bite immediately. A barren hole will give you nothing but a blank screen. One more thing to consider is the mood of the fish. Even in the best hotspot in the world, the fish won't always be biting aggressively. If you are marking fish on your sonar but can't get them to commit, it's time to downsize. This is where subtlety wins. Switch to a lighter line, maybe 2 or 3 pound test. Use the smallest jig in your box. Tip it with a single maggot or a wax worm, not a big cluster. Sometimes just holding the bait completely still for a full minute right in front of their face is what it takes to trigger a bite. The location is the first part of the battle, but your presentation is the second. Don't assume the spot is bad just because the fish are being picky. If you're marking them, you've already won half the war. Now you just have to convince them to eat. And remember that patience is a virtue, but stubbornness is not. There's a fine line between giving a spot a fair chance and wasting your entire day on dead water. My personal rule is about 1 hour. If I've moved around a new spot, tried different depths, changed my lures, and I haven't seen a single definitive sign of life on the electronics within 1 hour, I'm out of there. It's time to trust the evidence. The spot is a dud. I'll make a note on my map and move on to the next potential area. There are always more spots to explore. The worst thing you can do in ice fishing is become emotionally attached to a spot that isn't producing. Be a detective, gather clues, and when the clues lead to a dead end, start a new case somewhere else. So let's wrap this all up. If there is one single thing you take away from this video, let it be this: depth is a liar. It's a clue, but it is not the final destination. The biggest mistake in winter fishing is to simply find the deepest water and assume the fish are there. The real secret, the massive plot twist here, is that the magic happens in the details around that depth. It's the change in the bottom from mud to gravel. It's the single submerged tree on the edge of the drop-off. It's the underwater channel that leads to the feeding flat. It is the habitat, not the hole. Once you stop hunting for a number on a screen and start hunting for these combinations of features, your entire approach to winter fishing will change. You'll spend less time in barren water and more time in productive zones. You will become a far more efficient and successful angler. Thank you so much for watching. If this video helped you look at the ice in a new way, do me a huge favor and hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss our next videos where we break down more fishing myths. Now, I have one last question for you, and I really want to see the discussion in the comments. What is the single biggest winter fishing myth you've ever heard? Let's debunk some more of them together.